Oh,
Hello.
Hello. Disaster struck in the rectory. It's dropping things.
no, it's my Bible. I don't want to drop that.
No.
No.
All well?
Yeah, I tell you what, I think this idea of gin early in the morning is a good idea of yours, Joe.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with it. Is it
I
the
should
flavoured? Is yours a flavoured gin, though, Chris? Have you gone for the rhubarb and ginger?
I've got a clear one. Look.
Jolly good, yeah.
Although it is empty.
In fact, I've tried to hide the fact that I've got gin. I've still got what looks like the tea mug, but, you know.
I should explain.
All right, we're going to over-talk. We're not going to let Joe explain at all.
It's a bit like the BBC, you see. Have you noticed on the BBC there's always mugs strategically placed, and no one ever touches them, do they? So I'm going to put my mug where it can be seen, strategically placed for the whole. Yes, yeah. So thank you for the invitation to Gin Church this morning, Joe, and we hope the ladies don't mind us joining them. Hello, ladies. It's lovely that you could let us in today. It's a bit of a change to your time. You're normally in the evening, aren't you? But
we are normally in the evening, yes. Oh, well, it makes a change. Anyway, yes, I sent the wrong link out. But anyway, all is well now. We're all here and no one's drinking gin, so that's probably a good thing for 9 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, jolly.
It's beginning to sound like Pentecost. They were all drunk at 9 o'clock in the morning.
Well, as clergy, you've got to plan ahead and be prepared.
Yeah, got to build up your stamina for these things.
And what's the phrase? There's nothing like actually experiencing what you're going through.
Oh, for the rest of the day, I've got so much to do today. I think if I started on the gin now, it would be a disaster. So how's your knees, David?
Yeah, that's still there, hanging in or hanging off, or I'm not sure. You know, of course, I don't want to moan because us men don't moan about the pain that we're in and the suffering. And I've got the stick to hand just in case I need to grab it at any moment in time.
Is your COVID receding, Chris?
Just about. I've still got a bit of a headache, but it's taken, I think it's about 8 weeks now, or 7 weeks.
Oh, God. That's a long old time.
It's a long old time, and it's still... But yesterday, I think I actually did a day's work and got to the end of the day and thought, I don't feel too tired today.
Excellent.
So, gradually catching up.
Obviously, we weren't doing enough work, Chris.
Oh, shall I ignore that?
Yes, ever the encourager. So...
Yeah. As rural dean, I just make a note, you see. The Archdeacon will be very pleased for me to keep on top of this.
Oh, there you go.
Excellent.
I'm going to say goodbye. It was nice knowing you.
You're only allowed to do half of Red Chat each week. Yeah.
It's got to stay for the beginning. It's got to do the reading.
Yeah.
I don't think the senior clergy in the diocese watch Rev Chat, so I think we're probably safe.
Mm.
Oh, we'd have had it by now if they did watch it.
I think so, yeah.
We have no idea who watches. That's the problem.
Right. Well, we're still in our post-Easter excitement.
We are.
Ascension Day is next week, so we're still Eastering. And we're in the Book of Acts again, aren't we?
We're in the Book of Acts. Does that mean we're pausing already?
Oh, yeah. We'll go brief banter, quick into pause.
Brief banter, busy diary, into pause.
Yeah, that kind of sums up my life. Keep going.
So, reading from Acts chapter 16. During the night, Paul had a vision. There stood a man of Macedonia pleading with him, saying, "Come over to Macedonia and help us." When he had seen the vision, we immediately tried to cross over to Macedonia, being convinced that God had called us to proclaim the good news to them. We set sail from Troas and took a straight course to Samothrace, and the following day to Neapolis, and from there to Philippi, which is a leading city of the district of Macedonia and a Roman colony. We remained in this city for some days. On the Sabbath, we went outside the gate by the river, where we supposed there was a place of prayer. and we sat down and spoke to the women who had gathered there. A certain woman named Lydia, a worshipper of God, was listening to us. She was from the city of Thyatira and a dealer in purple cloth. The Lord opened her heart to listen eagerly to what was said by Paul. When she and her household were baptized, she urged us, saying, "If you have judged me to be faithful to the Lord, come and stay at my home." And she prevailed upon us. There, the reading from Acts must be used as either the first or the second reading on Sunday.
That's very interesting, because I'm about to, after this, record the address for the service, the online service.
Oh.
And I have no idea which reading the curate has had the person who's reading record.
I would. Oh yes. Well, I would say it's the gospel, but you don't know which gospel.
Which is the gospel?
There's two this week.
Problem. So I would just do my normal thing of tomfool of finding a way to address everything.
I can let you know if you'd like, because obviously we've got it already.
That would spoil the excitement of the people who are going to watching the online worship as well. But yeah, I love that. I love all these stories we've been hearing the last few weeks since Easter from the Acts of the Apostles about the establishment or the creation of what was becoming communities of followers and Christian, what I would call Christian communities, and the importance that Joe will be very pleased to back up of women in the stories.
I know.
You know? Another one today, and named, not as important as last week's, because she's only got one name, as you pointed out to us last week. You know, tell us what there was a name. Perhaps it's the same in both languages.
Yeah.
Well, my shock was it said a worshipper of God was listening to us. Isn't that our desire when we preach on a Sunday?
Absolutely.
Not according to David Sherlock at his preaching yesterday at the 10 o'clock.
What did he say?
Because by using the quote from Matthew's Gospel that he used about stay awake, wake up or whatever, he said this is what a preacher often says halfway through the sermon.
Stay awake. I like the thought of them gathered outside the city walls for prayer. I think that I think what we would understand is that this is communities way beyond the boundary of Israel, isn't it? So we're in Macedonia now, and so they wouldn't necessarily have had synagogues because they wouldn't have all been Jews, and so those who were gathering to worship had to find alternative places to worship. And it's interesting that the women are the ones who are gathered by the river, and that was the place of prayer. And we often talk about these. Finding your people of peace, and Paul and his followers are going to the people who they hope will be open to the message, the people of peace, because they're already worshippers of God. But of course, it's God at work. I think what's fascinating about these stories from Acts, and we had it in our Solway Ash service a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about Tabitha and Dorcas Tabitha. And I said to, David's heard me tell the story, I said to the congregation, who's the most important person in the story? And someone leapt up and said, Jesus. And I said, but Jesus isn't in this story because it's a story of Peter healing. And they went, oh, no, but he is, because it's his Holy Spirit at work in those people. And I think here it's that really clear thing where it says, the Lord opened her heart to listen eagerly to what was said by Paul. So the fact that Paul's doing God's work, God's working through Paul and giving him the words to speak, but God's working in Lydia and others around so that she can hear, so that she can understand, so that her heart is transformed. And I guess perhaps that's what I want to pray for when we're ministering in church. You know, I always pray before I preach that God will give me the words to say, but I don't often pray, give us the ears and the heart to receive what you're going to say.
Mm. So Lydia is obviously a very important person in that community, though, because she's a dealer in purple cloth.
Yeah, interestingly, it's not her home, is it? Because she's from Thyatira.
Yeah.
And if I had been a sensible person, I would have done my homework and produced a map at this point. Perhaps I might. In the wonders of the editing process, we might be able to have a quick map moment. But she's clearly, like you say, she's important, but it isn't her home, is it? But maybe that's where she goes to work or where she's become.
Or if she's a dealer in purple cloth, which, as David was trying to allude to, is of the most expensive cloth, could have two homes.
Maybe. It's interesting. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I guess as a merchant, one would travel.
And then you have a home in the cities that you regularly trade in.
Yeah. Also, this is really interesting thing about the bankrolling of ministry, which, you know, if you think about Jesus's ministry, which was, according to the Gospels, completely itinerant and he moved around, he was constantly dependent on the hospitality of others to keep him going. We don't know. I mean, we're not told, do we, whether he had a home that someone was looking after that he returned to, but he seems not to. He has a hometown, obviously, but you know, the disciples were reliant on hospitality, and that there were this whole group of people who sort of kept the show on the road. And it's the same here, that in order for the message to be spread, the disciples were dependent upon the wealth of others to enable it to happen. And Lydia is one of those people, and she's female, and she's wealthy, and she wants to be involved, which is really interesting.
Well, like you say, there must have been a group of people that were supporting, feeding all these travelling disciples.
What is interesting about all that, though, is that she obviously had got a whole family with her, or a whole household, because we're told that when she and her whole household were baptised. So that's interesting, that if she was an itinerant traveller, that she would take the whole household with her. Or are we assuming that's incorrectly, that just because she was from Thyatira and without the map, it could be the next little village like Mosterton is to South Barrett? It's not a long way to walk.
Not a long way, no.
I mean, like you say, we haven't done the homework, but it might be that she grew up in Thyatira and now lives in Philippi.
Yeah, exactly, because I'm definitely a woman of Ealing, West London, but I haven't lived there for...
sorry, I thought that you were saying you'd healed somebody.
Woman of Ealing, yes.
Yes, well, that hence the opportunity for limericks, but let's not do that now. But yes, yeah, absolutely. That's her identity, who she is, but she doesn't live there anymore.
Yeah.
I just think the other thing...
Sorry, I'll just get back to it. It's interesting, isn't it? In those early days, my understanding is that if the head of the household were baptised, then whether the others had water thrown at them or not, they were automatically counted as baptised as well. So it may have been, of course, just to cut my story short, in the excitement of trying to work out where she was from, and she certainly wasn't from Ealing, is that it could have been that she was the only one present, and because she was baptised, the whole household in proxy, of course, were baptised as well, which is even...
Yeah, I've often pondered what that was like, because you hear these stories of people coming to faith, but you have no idea whether the other people in the household had held that same faith and were equally delighted by what has happened. But yes, that was how it was.
Yeah.
The other thing it really reminds me is that of course, we talk a lot about vocation, about what God has equipped us to do in his service, what gifts he's given us. And of course, Lydia's gift was wealth, possibly influence, and hospitality, because she said, come and stay at my house. And so, you know, if we're not too, well, we often confuse ministry as in the thing that people do up the front, the important, potentially important bit. But actually, it's often the least important bit, whoever stands and leads the service, because actually it's that all the people who've contributed to what's going on in the church that day. You couldn't, you know, if you didn't have anyone to come in and unlock the door or switch the lights on or lay up the table or put the coffee on or move the chairs or mow the churchyard or do all the things that we all do together in community, it's quite difficult to continue the ministry of the kingdom. So I think, it reminds us that our vocation can be lots of different things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, again, we are thinking, because perhaps part of what we've been taught or we've learned at theological college suggests that because she dealt in purple cloth, she was wealthy. We don't know, because it doesn't actually tell us she's wealthy or what she's got or whatever. We're just kind of assuming that perhaps that's the case. But even if she wasn't wealthy, her calling at that moment has been confirmed because she'd accepted baptism.
Yeah.
Go
on, Chris. Sorry.
I often thought, say, if she was baptised with her whole household, yes, we don't necessarily know what the individuals in the household believed, but I've always regarded the Christian faith as a collective. We are together. We don't have to by rote believe every single word of every slant of theology and agree with and all theologians agree with one another. But together, it's the household accepting the Christian faith, and that between them, they're baptised, and between them, they believe that Jesus died and rose again. I think it's quite a simple threshold for the Christian faith of what we believe. Sometimes we overcomplicate it by overimposing too many rules, and the whole household could agree and accept, yes, we're going to be Christians and we want to be baptised along with our leader or the head of our household.
Yeah.
And there's another whole discussion there if that actually Lydia is the head of the household.
Absolutely. That's not necessarily usual in the first century to have the woman as the head of the household.
Or maybe it was more usual than we thought.
Well, true, but it's interesting that often women are recorded in relation to the man who's responsible for them. And there's no mention of her man, if there was a man.
He could have died, of course. We don't know. But I think that's what's interesting about these stories, because there are, as you say, Chris, so many different ways of coming and looking at them. And that story, I've always loved the story of Lydia, because it's so not mysterious, but there are lots of intriguing things unanswered for me when you just read it from the page in the book, so to speak. But a lovely story. I also like the bit at the beginning when they're pleading with Paul, come over. And you think, Paul travelled for miles. I mean, he must have spent more time travelling than he actually did talking to people. I thought, because when you look at the journeys that he made by ship and all the rest of it, and then when he got there, he had to walk to places because there was no bus system, a bit like today. Rural bus systems were very poor in those days around that part of the world.
You only got a donkey through once a day. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and never at all at Christmas. The donkey just wasn't there, was it? So you think of the miles that he travelled in establishing these communities of believers and followers. It's stunning, really.
But then if you put it into what we call modern day pilgrimage terms, you do your talking whilst you're walking.
Yeah, I agree.
There'll be a lot of talking amongst the followers, explaining things and discussing things and experiencing as you walk along the road. It's one of the big things we find in all these modern pilgrimage programs on the television, isn't it? That they gradually learn and experience, and you discuss, and you can find out about an experience as you walk. And walking actually can be quite a powerful thing to be doing. So it's not just a matter of, in a modern day, getting on a bus, driving to a big concert venue, preaching to a few thousand people, walking off backstage and jumping on the bus to the next one with nothing in between. It's more about, because you walk and then you get to a village, you sit down and somebody in the village gives you lunch. So you're having lunch with half a dozen people. And it's those small little gatherings, those small, informal, general discussions that just actually is where most of the evangelism comes in.
Yeah. And that's where, for us, our opportunities for evangelism are. They're with the people we have coffee with or have dinner with or go for a walk with or chat to in the queue for the fruit and veg shop. It's those daily interactions, isn't it? Even if they're not overtly talking about Jesus, but it's how we model the love of God in how we speak and act and behave in our communities.
And I think it's probably a lesson for dear listener is actually our Christian faith is as evident, if not more evident, in the informal, general things we do every day. And when we are sat down having a meal, when we are chatting to our friends, people consciously or subconsciously are looking at how we behave, what we're saying. And it's a great chance for our friends to ask us questions about things.
That's a good way of putting it.
And a good place to end. And some inspiration for us in the week to come. So next week, we will be in that funny little time between Ascension and Pentecost.
Ooh.
And we'll be doing some praying in Beaminster. Our prayer space will be in by then for Thy Kingdom Come. So
We will.
hopefully we can reflect a bit on that when we meet again.
You can bring your original Ascension Day kitchen,
arrow.
the arrow on the wall of the church. Yeah, you can bring it.
I might have to make another one of them.
Yeah.
You can join us wherever you find us, walking in the queue, having coffee, or on our Facebook pages, Benefice of Egerton Tacomas or Beaminster Team, and we're around all over the place. Websites, TikTok, Instagram. You know the drill. But thank you for joining us, and we'll see you again next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.